Well, I've been working at Shadow Mountain for 17 years total. I took a 2-year break a couple years ago, worked at a church in Tennessee. And for the first 15 years, I was the youth minister overseeing junior high and senior high. Went away to Memphis, then came back as the educational ministries pastor, which oversees birth through 12th grade. And there's basically 5 different departments. There's junior high, senior high, kids ministry, the weekly preschool that we have, and then a program called Kids Care, which is the paid child care service that the church has for different events. So those are my 5 areas that I oversee. So it's birth through 12th grade, basically. So I've worked out here a total of 17 years, been in ministry almost 20 years as a career, which I love. And for me now, this is probably my dream job. I love meeting with families. It's a lot of family ministry now, and it's also a lot of behind-the-scenes administrative work, equipping teams, equipping the leaders of each of those departments, and a lot of staff development. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Mm-hmm. We try to train the leaders specifically towards their department. So I really make sure that they have a lot of resources, first of all. Now, sometimes the resources will be a training seminar we might go to, like for children's ministry, the Children's Pastors Conference, but also for children's youth or any of the departments to make sure they have curriculum resources. Now, sometimes we'll write our own curriculum, come up with our own teaching topics, but we found that there should be a good support base of curriculum. So we'll use a few different curriculum companies to make sure we can pull from them. So we kind of have that as far as the written formula, and then we sit down as a team, and we're really still developing this part as a unified team, all the different departments, because it's been more kind of siloed, more individual departments have been writing their own thing. We're trying to come up with a birth through 12th grade format that would tie all of the ministries together. So once we get this curriculum together, we have resources for them. If they need to go to a training seminar, we'll provide them. We really sit down with our individual teams and monthly as a whole team and start to field questions what we want to accomplish. And then we also keep in line with the vision of where the church is going, the whole church, not just our different departments. For our church, we want to make sure we stay where Pastor Jeremiah is going as far as teaching, as far as themes, as far as campaigns, things like that. So we'll line up the teaching appropriate with that. We rely on a lot of volunteers, and volunteers, we get, I think, some of the best ones, but also there's some ones that maybe just don't know what it's going to take to be a volunteer. There's a lot of commitment, weekly commitment that you have to have with that. So as we do rely on the volunteers, we also have to make sure that they are getting the support, not just the teaching the support, but that they feel valued. So we make sure they feel valued and knowing how important their role is. But really the biggest thing is making sure that they have their curriculum early. I mean, whatever one you want to use, and there's a lot of good curriculums, or that they have a chance to write their curriculum if they're going to teach it more than just a week ahead of time. We want to have that to them a few months ahead of time, at least a season ahead of time, so they know what they're getting into. Every department has a little bit of different training as far as with their volunteers. Some do it weekly, some do it monthly. With our paid staff who I meet with, we make sure that I meet with each of those leaders weekly basis, but also we have a monthly staff meeting where all the teams come together. So a lot of it's communication, and we found that if we communicate with the volunteers and with the people who are paid, that usually answers a lot of their question. But always looking for resources. There's a lot of great online resources for kids ministry. There's as far as big seminars, there's the National Children's Pastor, there's the Youth Specialties Convention, there's Catalyst that can be more of a broad area of leadership ministry. So there's plenty of resources online that you can find out about just by checking your computer and then getting some of your team to that. If we could take every volunteer, if we could take everyone to one of those things together, it'd be awesome. But a lot of times our role as paid leaders, and my role as a educational pastor, is to bring back that information and share with them. So that's kind of how we do that. Well, I really believe no matter what ministry you're going to be involved in, but I really see an educational ministry is that you realize it's a calling more than just a career or occupation or vocation. I mean, you will have that with whatever ministry job you're in, but what I've learned, especially this last year, is that you have to be okay in this position not being the upfront guy. Now, I think that I've had just as much joy equipping as far as seeing them be able to do their job as I have whenever I'm the teacher up front. So one thing I will say is get as much education as you can for no matter what role you're in. A bachelor's is great, but also your master's, your MDiv, and some, either whether it's theological studies or some sort of studies, just because that's going to help you be, I think, a well-balanced minister, and also help you just feel equipped no matter what role God calls you into. Educational ministries at different churches will mean different things. You know, I'm very blessed that I get to focus on birth through 12th grade. But where the adults do come out is the parents. You have to feel like you're able to approach the parents too, and be able to talk to the parents, and vice versa. They have to feel like they can approach you and talk to you. So I think as you're preparing for this ministry, anything that you can do for counseling-wise, family ministry-wise, that will supplement and be go hand in hand with the educational ministry's degree. You know, as far as the theology part of it, there's a lot of good lexicons, there's a lot of good books. You know, you don't have to be a Greek expert or Hebrew expert anymore. You just have to be willing to study. I think that the best ministers I've seen have been people that have been lifelong learners, and that's what I would say in this ministry too. Just don't stop learning because you're in that position. Look for ways to improve your leadership skills. Some educational pastors will have more of an adult focus where they might farm out some of the kids' work. I think that's really a little bit too late. I think if you're going to be really effective, you start with the kids at the youngest age you possibly can and get them involved in studying God's Word, and then not just relying on the church to do that. It's really the family, the mom and dad, that it's our calling to be that primary spiritual influencer in our children's lives. So really that's probably my biggest role I see as my job as an educational pastor. Equipping, yes, but also equipping the family to where mom and dad feel like they just don't rely on the church, that they have to take that initiative to be that spiritual provider for their kids' lives. I think a lot of times families, and I might be rabbit trailing a little bit, but a lot of times families have just relied on the church too much to do that. And if you look back Old and New Testament, it was always the parents' responsibility to be the number one Christian educator of their kids' lives. And I'm hoping that's what we can keep instilling into our families here at Shadow Mountain. And it's, you know, some get it, and then some it's like turning an aircraft carrier. It's very slowly, but you start to see, okay, they will take that responsibility on. But when you train the whole family as an educator with these Christian morals and values, you really start to see how much more effective it is rather than just focusing on an age group when you focus on the whole family. So I know I rabbit trail a little bit, but that's just my little soapbox right there, I guess, that we need to be a Christian educator of the whole family and help parents feel equipped to be that to their kids. I think the challenge in this ministry, no matter if it's a big or a large church, is to make sure you're lined up with where the senior pastor wants to go. Obviously, this is a support position. I look at my role as someone to be very loyal to Christ, obviously, but also loyal to our senior pastor. I don't want to take the Christian Ed department a different way than where the pastor wants to go. So keeping good communication, I think, with the pastor is key. Trying to know what he's going to teach on. I mean, a dream of mine is if we could line up all of Pastor Jeremiah's teaching studies, what he's doing, and somehow know enough ahead of time to get that into the kids ministry where the whole family can be teaching on the same thing through the different departments. We'll keep working on it. We can't always do it, but we try to take that step to get closer to that. Challenges too, I think what I said before, just the biggest one is, and it kind of breaks your heart a little bit too, is that just when you're working with, in my role, especially birth through 12th grade, how much parents do rely on the church instead of wanting to be trained themselves. One thing that I think has benefited us, we've been trying to offer parent equipping nights where we bring in a speaker or have a topic that's related to help equip them. Now we'll get families there, but sometimes a lot of families just say, "Oh, that's why we have you as the church." So that's probably the biggest challenge right there, is just to get parents to know, adults to know that it's our responsibility, and even adults that don't have kids, maybe their grandparents or people who have raised their kids already, or maybe don't have kids. Like, if we look at the Bible, the main role of the church, I think, is to equip others, one of the main roles. And I think that every adult should be equipping a younger person, almost like, a father figure, whether that's biological or just like mentorship, and I think mentoring is huge. I think that we need to do a better job at doing that. I think that every Christian, if this was a dream world, could be mentoring someone younger so they could pass on that faith. I think if we forget to mentor, I think we forget that relationship more than just what's in the Sunday classroom or Wednesday, whenever you have your teaching. I think if we forget that, I think people aren't going to be grounded in the faith. I know I have a mentor that's 20 years older than me, and he's taught me a lot about Christian things, but he's also taught me a lot about life and how those Christian things relate to life. If a student, no matter how old or young they are, can see an adult, maybe they don't even have Christian parents, so they're looking at that other adult. If they can have that model, that role model or mentor, I think as Christian educators, that'll be a huge difference if we can instill that into our congregations. And there's always the ones, the challenges, like, you can have curriculum ready, you can have things in place, but sometimes leaders still just won't study before the night before they have to give a lesson and things. And I think that's just short-circuiting what God wants to do through that person in the ministry. And they can have the greatest intentions, and life gets busy, we all know that, but setting the time apart to study for whatever you're going to be presenting to the whatever class you're teaching and things like that. And I think finally just knowing that your life is always a goldfish bowl. I mean, we've seen a lot of Christian leaders, no matter what role, have attention drawn to themselves because they've morally fell or things like that. And I think that we as Christian leaders, and especially us that, I guess, influence families, we need to make sure that we have a life above reproach. And that's not a popular thing to talk about anymore, but really not to take advantage of the liberty we have in Christ, but to use that liberty to bring others to Him. And yeah, that means you might have to sacrifice things, or maybe you don't do certain things, but you know what? God always blesses things in other ways, and the impact you have on kids, on families, is incredible when you are above reproach, when someone can say, you know what, that person, I saw a reflection of Christ in him or her. So I know that's some of the challenges, I think, and I think as we get closer to the Lord's return, I think that there's going to be more things that pull Christian leaders down, pull ministers down, and we just have to be guarding our heart. I'm not perfect. I mean, I have to have accountability. That's a huge thing, is have someone, no matter how old or young you are, have someone you're accountable to, have that mentor for your life too, so you can be effective for the long term, So as a Christian education pastor, if that's your title or some form of that, I think you have to be okay with behind the scenes. God has called all different people to all different ministries, and you may not be the most administrative, but you have to be okay with that in this position, because you're going to be a lot of times an equipper, someone that hopefully pours into volunteers or pours into your paid staff, and you might not have the limelight all the time. You might be that guy, and I've had a couple people, Tom Thompson, someone I respect here, who's taught me that you have to be okay sometimes with being that behind-the-scenes person. And if you're okay with that, I mean, I think you'll be the greatest Christian education pastors out, if you stay humble before the Lord and things like that. But I think that it's just really, it's okay to be that. You do that job that maybe no one else will see, but you give it the same amount of passion as if the world is watching, but you know that God is watching, and that's what He calls us to, that faithfulness. But there is a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff in Christian education, so if you're okay with that, you'll love this job. I'm learning to be loving, and now that I see other people up front just doing a great job, I think it's a blessing for me too.